Oh, look, it's another maroon-clad football team from the South making something out of nothing when it comes to Mizzou football. That sure sounds familiar to me, and I'll explain why coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, I will have my final prediction for this Missouri-Texas A&M ball game, and also going to break down the ramifications if Missouri wins or loses. But before I start the show, I do want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And I got to say, I get a little bit tired of coaches, again, from down south who wear maroon. You may know where I'm going here. Back in the day, Bob Stoops, of course, of Oklahoma, used to take any slight or jab, perceived or imaginary or otherwise, and just take it and run with it and make it into the supposed bulletin board material. And of course, once again, we're seeing this play out again in real time with Texas A&M and Mike Elko. You may have heard Brady Cook earlier in the week talking with the media. They were asking him about the crowd noise down in Kyle Field. Of course, Brady was saying, hey, this is not exactly my first rodeo in the SEC. I've been to Georgia. I've been to several other places that are incredibly loud. And his point was just talking not specifically about Kyle Field, but talking generally. Cook said at some point, it can only get so loud. In my opinion, the noise at practice is actually louder. They put these big speakers pretty much 2 feet right behind me. You can't hear anything. It's loud. At stadiums, it's loud, but it's like a surrounding, more distant loud. So that seems pretty innocuous, right? Does that seem like a big middle finger to the good people of College Station, Texas, or the Aggies or anything like that? I certainly didn't take it that way, but that didn't stop Mike Elko, who said on one program leading up to the game called the Aggie Football Hour, he said, it has been interesting that we've had people call out Kyle Field a little bit. I heard their quarterback say today that it's louder in practice than it is at Kyle Field. To me, that's a challenge to the 12th man. And also a Texas A&M linebacker on X said to these comments that were, of course, clipped onto the internet, aggregated, if you will, is often the modern day phrase, simply bet. In other words, I'll take that bet that Kyle Field is louder than your practice. Well, first of all, my big reaction here is that despite being a big member of the internet commentariat, it does get to be a frustrating place at times. A dumb, frustrating place. Because again, Lord knows we can't just let Brady Cook have some honest comments about the situation. By the way, have any of you ever been to a rock concert, any type of music event that's really, really loud? If you're right next to the speakers, I'll be honest, I can't take it. I don't like being right next to those speakers. My delicate little eardrums just can't take it. If you want to call me soft, you know what, in this particular case, I will wear that mantle. But really, I've been to many games at Faurot Field, and I've never been to anything approaching as loud as an actual rock concert at, say, the Chicago House of Blues by George Thorogood back circa 2009 or so. That's the particular show that I'm remembering off the top of my head. But despite the internet being a dumb place, I would expect a little bit more from Mike Elko, a 47-year-old man, by the way. And this is what I get. I've been talking nicely about Mike Elko ever since he got hired by Texas A&M. I thought he was an excellent hire for the Aggies. And if I had to bet money, speaking of bet, well, I would bet that Mike Elko will do a pretty good job at Texas A&M. But this is what I get for being a nice guy. Lesson learned. Well, Mike Elko, again, You're 47 years old. Brady Cook is 22. I have a simple question for you. Have you no dignity, sir? Have you no shame? Because you know exactly what Brady Cook was saying, unless you're really as dumb as all the people on the internet who just simply take a quote, blow it out of proportion, and then act like, people love to get on their high horse and feel high and mighty on the internet and get some type of status. I don't know. I've seen this happen with me, so maybe it's hitting a little bit of a personal note here. But just regardless, I would like to think that Mike Elko is a little bit above this. Bob Stoops obviously was not, but I don't know. I've tended to learn these days when somebody shows you who they are, you should probably believe them. And even, it's not just people at Texas A&M who are commenting on this. Mark Harris at Outkick, by the way, said on Cook, while Cook's statement is valid, speakers next to your ears are going to be louder than fans 50-plus yards away from you, but it was definitely an unnecessary thing to say. Definitely an unnecessary? Why? Again, you said it was valid. So if the statement is valid, that's another way of saying that it's true. So we're not supposed to say true things anymore just so we don't accidentally ruffle someone's feathers, or more accurately, a coach who takes a statement out of context and attempts to ruffle up his own feathers ruffle up his fan base's feathers in order to what? Get an extra 5% more of crowd noise at Kyle Field. Just kind of a bizarre thing to me. My whole thing is there to Mark Harris at Outkick and anybody, especially media members and commentators who have this type of attitude. Well, if you want Bill Belichick type press conferences throughout all of college football, well, then congratulations to you, because that's exactly what you're going to get. If you're going to take really, truly innocuous comments like this by Brady Cook, him basically, explaining basic physics to people. Yes, a speaker right next to your head is is louder than, 80,000 people dispersed outside, that type of deal. Basically, all Brady Cook was saying is, yes, this is our first road game, but I've been in loud environments before, and I feel like our preparation the noise isn't going to be an issue. Now, we'll see whether that's true or not come Saturday, but you like the confidence from Brady Cook, and frankly, what do you expect him to say other than, we're on to Cincinnati? If you want him to be Bill Belichick, then get him the cutoff hoodie and make him monotone. But I don't know. To me, that just goes up the old rear end a little bit sideways there with Mike Elko. Again, being the grown A man that he is, trying to pick on a college student there, not his greatest look. And by pick on, that's really the wrong word. I mean, it's just to twist the words there for your own advantage. Come on, Mike Elko. You got to be better than that, don't you? In this note from Mizzou historian Tom Orff on X, he says, on this date, October 4th in 2008, Nebraska claimed they were going to shut down the Tiger offense, but on the third play of the game, a Chase Daniel to Jeremy Maclin 58-yard touchdown started a deluge as Missouri scored on 8 of its first 9 possessions in a 52-17 win. And that was certainly the highlight of the 2008 season and the high point of the 2008 season. No doubt about that. One of my favorite victories of all time for Missouri to this day. But that victory definitely was a big surprise just in terms of the actual output there. Missouri winning by 35 points there was a huge surprise. So what if Missouri, that got me thinking, what if Missouri has a huge surprise against the Aggies tomorrow with a blowout victory? Well, what if they just barely squeak by and get a victory? Or on the other side, suffer a close loss or, God forbid, a blowout loss tomorrow in Kyle Field? Hey, I've got my predictions coming up, but clearly I'm prepared for anything. Anything is possible as a Missouri fan. I am well aware of that. So let's talk about the possibilities and, of course, my final prediction on the ball game here in just a minute. First, though, let's talk about my friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. And if you haven't noticed, the Kansas City Chiefs have not been a very good bet the last couple years. Yeah, Super Bowl victory last season, but not great against the spread. I'll promise you that. That trend is continuing this season. I'd like to see the Chiefs actually prove me wrong. So let's stay off the 5.5 at home against the Saints on Monday night once again. But regardless of what you're into and your angles, you got to check out FanDuel.com. From a Mizzou football fan's perspective, I think if the Tigers win comfortably tomorrow in College Station, I think it's obviously going to be all sunshine and rainbows. We'll be thinking, bring on the Crimson Tide. I think there's going to be very little to complain about if the Tigers win by a couple possessions or more, relatively dominant, maybe even a blowout type victory. If that happens, I think Missouri fans, all the doubts we've had from the past few weeks will basically disappear, at least for a few days or so. Now, the Tigers are still going to have to beat Auburn at home in a couple weeks, and while Auburn's obviously gotten off to a rough start with an incredible amount of turnovers, speaking of a deluge of turnovers from the other Tigers has what has happened to start their season. But still, Auburn not without talent whatsoever. You never know what's going to come from a Hugh Freeze squad in bigger type games, it would seem. I'm just saying no guarantee whatsoever there. UMass on the road, I'm going to almost guarantee that Missouri gets a win there. Now, a close win, I think Missouri fans will obviously be happy. I just don't think they're going to be over the moon like they will be with a comfortable victory. But regardless, I think almost no matter what happens tomorrow, I think from a national perspective, and I was talking about the Mizzou perspective just now, but I think the rest of the nation is going to remain skeptical of the Tigers until we go to Tuscaloosa. Maybe the Missouri doesn't even have to necessarily win that game to win over the rest of the country. If the Tigers are simply competitive against Alabama, maybe they make the Tide sweat. Maybe that's enough to gain some respectability nationally, because last season it seems like that's what happened against Georgia, believe it or not. Yes, the Tigers lost to the Bulldogs, but it seemed nationally the amount of respect that Missouri got really shot up, especially you listen to comments post-game from Kirby Smart about the physicality of Missouri's offensive line and the run game and all that good stuff. That was something that people took notice of. And this is a national type of game on ABC, 11 o'clock. This is going to have a brighter spotlight on it than any game Missouri has played so far, I would say, just from a television perspective as well. So I just think that no matter what happens, I just think until, from a national perspective, Missouri's got to go down there and play well against the Tide, or else people aren't going to take us seriously after the relatively close scrapes with Boston College and even more so against Vanderbilt. A lot of that is fair. It really is. I can't say if I weren't a diehard Missouri fan, somebody who studies this as closely as I do, I doubt I'd be as optimistic. But you know what? I am more optimistic than I think the nation for a few reasons. And let me recap why. I've said this on a couple different platforms, including here and Locked On College Football as well, but it's worth recapping. To me, again, the spot for Missouri here. You've got a bye week, right? Always helpful to have a bye week from a whole bunch of different perspectives, injuries, preparation, all kinds of stuff. Well, also, the next week, Missouri at Amherst, Massachusetts for a ball game against UMass. A bizarre scheduling, but one that kind of strangely is going to work out, I think, in the long run for Missouri. So it's an advantageous spot in a really huge game for Missouri. And number two, I also just think Brady Cook is a better quarterback, a more experienced. Well, that's just an objective fact. He is more experienced than Marcel Reed. But I just think Cook's a better quarterback, and I also think the Missouri offense is a little bit more balanced than Texas A&M's. I think they have a more dynamic passing game, even though maybe that hasn't all shown up so far here early in the season. And finally, again, while I gave Mike Elko some deserved guff, in my opinion, in the opening segment, he is a good coach. I really believe that. I also believe that, yes, we're 5/12 through the Texas A&M season here. I paused there because somebody gave me crap for some shoddy math on the previous episode on that topic. But regardless, we're only a few games into Elko's term here as Texas A&M's coach, whereas Eli Drinkwitz is well in to his term here at Missouri, year 5. You've already had the breakout season. Again, I just think for all of those reasons, I think Missouri is going to win this game in a relatively low-scoring fashion, because I do have a lot of respect for Texas A&M's defense and, well, especially that front seven. Nick Scorton's a heck of a player, and ultimately I think this is kind of a slugfest that Missouri ends up winning about 20-17. And I know a lot of people are going to be surprised. Excuse me, I said 20-17. I meant 20-7. Yes, 20-7 Missouri over Texas A&M. I think a lot of people will be surprised I'm only giving the Aggies a touchdown. I just don't really see their passing game threatening Missouri in terms of explosive plays, and that's really been the Tigers' cardinal sin so far. Their big bugaboo so far has been explosive plays in the passing game. I just don't see Marcel Reed, who I think is a good game manager, a solid quarterback, solid scrambler. I'm not sure that he and that Texas A&M passing game have what it takes to make explosive plays against Missouri. So otherwise, I think the Missouri defense has been pretty solid and really impressive and deep so far. So to me, again, give me the Tigers 20 and Texas A&M 7. So obviously I'm feeling optimistic about the Tigers' chances tomorrow, but obviously there's a real chance Missouri loses as well. We're talking about a coin flip ball game here, according to my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. In fact, Texas A&M a slight favorite here at -2.5. So what if the Tigers do lose tomorrow? Well, obviously the Missouri fan base is going to really be down in the dumps. So much pressure has been put on this season, and in particular making the playoff. Well, if Missouri loses tomorrow, I think most Tiger fans, especially the most negatively oriented, are going to be saying the playoffs are over and beat Alabama. Pish posh. There's not a chance in heck of that happening. Yeah, right. That type of deal. But of course, none of that will actually be true. Now, will the path get a lot harder for Missouri if they lose to Texas A&M? Absolutely. But I will point out that I still think that 10-2 will probably get Missouri in, of course, depending on how things play out. Now, of course, I will admit I'm a little bit less confident, I should say. I'm a little bit less confident in 10-2 getting Missouri in right now than I would have been this past offseason. If anything, Missouri's easiest schedule in the SEC on paper really has probably gotten a little bit easier, if anything. But the reason I still think that 10-2, I think all the scenarios, you play them out in your head. I think too many people are just assuming that the teams that are currently right around Missouri's ranking, well, they'll just win out, that type of deal. Again, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? Well, who knows what's going to happen around the country the rest of the season, as we have basically, 2/3 of the way to go here, most of the country. The point here is, even though as we stand today, this offseason, my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook had Missouri plus 180 to make the college football playoff. Well, now they're plus 125. So those odds have gone down quite a bit in Missouri's favor to make the college football playoff. So in other words, long story short, too long, didn't read. Well, Missouri, according to the sports books, has a better chance to make the playoff today than it did when it started the season. So that goes sort of against a lot of the negative mentality you have from Missouri fans right now. I would just point out that regardless of your mentality, if Missouri wins tomorrow, I think they're basically going to have even or better odds to make the college football playoff. So that just shows you this truly is an enormously important fulcrum type game for the entire season. And coming up, if you think name, image, and likeness and the current structure of it is ridiculous, well, there's no better example of that than Sam Horn's Twitter feed, plus the college football Super League proposal that went around the internet the last few days. I gotta say, I don't think I've ever viscerally hated anything more in my entire life at first glance. And it appears Greg Sankey and I agree on this particular take. So let's talk about all that after these quick words. Now, here comes a phrase I've said quite a bit on the program lately. I'm going to apply it to Missouri backup quarterback and pitcher Sam Horn this time, which is, I don't know what Sam Horn's making in terms of NIL, but he's doing pretty good, especially compared to college athletes of the past. But of course, in a court of law, Missouri would tell you, or with the NCAA, whatever it might be, they would tell you that, no, we don't pay Sam Horn to play football. Of course, everyone with a brain can tell you that that is, in fact, not true. But again, in a court of law, Missouri would tell you that, well, Sam Horn is basically paid to do promotion for the athletic department, I suppose, because that's all I can really figure out here. If you look at Sam Horn's last 3 tweets on his X account, and by the way, I'm bringing up Sam Horn here as just an example. I've just seen this before with his particular account, not trying to single him out or criticize him whatsoever. Hey, go get that paper, Sam. I'm not mad at you whatsoever. By all means, secure that NIL bag. If I could get that kind of money for sending out a few tweets, I think I would too. But again, Sam's most recent tweet, you want to see domination? Mizzou is the place. Mizzou Arena is the place to be. Lock in your season tickets now. And this is at Mizzou women's basketball with a pretty slickly recorded video that the university may have gave him as well. His next tweet, this is from September 20th. That previous one was from the 25th. September 20th, Sam says, from the heart of Missouri to Missouri's farms to the heart of Mizzou's field, it's all about hard work. Celebrate at the Ag Appreciation Game. That was the Tigers game, football game on the 21st. So more promotion. And then the 19th, this is his third tweet. Mizzou soccer is bringing the heat against Texas A&M. It's our job to bring the noise. Be there. And another slickly produced video by Mizzou. So I don't know how much value the Tigers are really getting out of those particular promotions from Sam Horn. I'd say it's pretty obvious the purpose of those particular tweets. A little bit of a CYA type of tweet, if you will. A CYAX. Is that anything I just invented? I like it. But for real, again, nothing against Sam here whatsoever. I'm all for the guys getting money, but this just shows the absolute absurdity of the current system where somehow you can get money for sending out, pretty innocuous tweets about loving Missouri women's basketball and soccer. Whereas, I don't know, actually getting some of the television money from Disney and what have you, well, no, we can't possibly have that. Pretty convenient for the people in charge. And speaking of things that are convenient for the people in charge, I got to say, this proposed college super league that made the rounds this past week in the media, well, that was pretty convenient as well. Something called the College Sports Tomorrow, a group of executives and administrators apparently throughout the college football landscape proposed streamlining college football, they called, into a college football super league. Well, I got to say, I don't think I've ever viscerally hated anything more in my entire life. Now, on one hand, if you're a fan of the old Big Eight, I suppose you might like this proposal. Missouri would be in a 6-team division with Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Colorado. Yes, no Nebraska. I know it's a bummer, but we'll live without the Huskers somehow. But just regardless, in general, I have to say, I'm just tired of messing with college football at this point. listen, I understand that change is inevitable in life. And of course, how teams play football is going to change all the time. It's changed a ton from the days of Don Farrow's split tee to, of course, Chase Daniel spreading it out with 5 wide. And now, of course, Missouri is a little bit of a combination of maybe both of those things with, a pistol type run game and they throw it around the yard too. But regardless, change is inevitable. In terms of X's and O's, I'm on board with all that type of change. Of course, every generation has players that are different too. You have to accept that. That's part of life. But at a certain point, college football is about tradition and things being the same for 100 years. And if you're just constantly changing the structure of the sport, what exactly are we doing here? I just think that's just, I don't know. That's just my opinion. I just hate this. I'm used to the SEC now at this point. Maybe you could have talked me into this before all of this radical conference realignment of the past decade plus. But now at this moment, I'm just over reshuffling everything. And by the way, you look at it from other teams' perspective. In the South, for instance, LSU would be in a division with Arkansas, Houston, Memphis, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. Do you think they would like that better than the current structure of the Southeastern Conference? I don't see any scenario in which that makes sense whatsoever for LSU. So it's not just, I think Missouri would be a lot more satisfied with that particular arrangement than LSU. So anyway, I'd be interested to hear what all of you hear. Coming back on the show, sorry, I'm a little bit flustered. My daughter has entered my office here. Shoo, get out. I'm almost done, honey. I'll talk to you in a second. So with all that being said, I will join you after the Texas A&M game tomorrow for a post-game recap. No matter what happens, hopefully it'll be a fun victory. But regardless, until next time, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked on Mizzou.